And so, but bass and crawfish, I think bass know that. They know when to be, when these crawfish are going to be most abundant. And they know those areas, and they know when to be there. It's genetic or whatever you want to call it. But brim to me, their behavior is the only one I will try to act like I understand. It's because I think they're like a bass. I think they use the same types of habitat. They will go just as deep. I mean, you catch them on the jig.
Well, one other thing I wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on was how to find those bigger fish areas. So I know you said like on Toledo Bend, there's areas where you have the mixture of both, but I know some lakes, there's certain sections that just have those bigger fish, and if you just go there and set up, you can catch them. One great example is like Grand Lake, where Edwin Evers, he went up that Elk River, and he knew that there were 6, 7, 8 pounders living up that river, and he was able to go catch a 28-pound bag the last day of the Classic, win the tournament. And he knew they were there, but he didn't go fish them every day. He went and fished 3 different sections of the lake. And I just want to understand, like, how do you go about knowing that there's big fish there, especially if they only have such a small bite window that you maybe only have them show themselves on a lure 1 hour a day?
Well, I think I can answer that better than I could have 10 years ago or earlier in my career, because I'm learning the mistakes I made when it comes to those quality fish. And if I look back now, I challenge you that anybody in tournament fishing, anybody, pick their name, on any tournament group that's caught more live fish, 30-plus pound bags than I have in the last 5 to 6 years. There's nobody out there in tournament fishing that I'm aware of. And I challenge them, because if there is, I'd like to hear about it. And you say, well, yeah, okay. And you know what I've had to do to catch those fish? It's not change areas. The same area that I just described to you earlier about the high nutrient areas are holding them. It's the way I fished those areas. That's what I had to change. I don't have to change the areas. The number one thing is the nutrients in the area and the best habitat in the area. That's where the big fish are going to be.
Would you be willing to share what your approach
is? A giant, I mean, a big lion or the biggest pride out there, and there's multiple prides living in an area, and it's going to have the best area.
Yeah.
Big fish are the same way. They're going to stay where their most food is, which is where the most nutrients are, and they're going to stay where the best habitat is, whether it's grass or brush or flooded brush or whatever. Yeah, very rarely you're going to find them around broken rock.
Yeah. Okay.
Or for very long. I'm not saying you won't catch one there occasionally. And it's really simple. I had to slow down. I couldn't blow through the areas like I've done my whole career. And my whole career, that I was concentrating on catching 10 and 15 limits, I didn't care if I ever caught a big fish. I just knew the amount of casts I was going to make. I was going to catch one occasionally, but I wasn't focused on them. And so what I did most of my early career, I caught the 2-pounders and the 3-pounders, the most aggressive, that had the largest window of time to be caught. But I blew through so fast, I'd occasionally catch a good one, but I'd leave the other 10 good ones there. I'd already blown past them. So I simply, if I had to name one thing that has helped me catch more big fish than anything, and this sounds like a sales pitch, is power poles. Because I cannot keep that right foot off the troll motor. But I can dig those power poles in the ground, and even that right foot's trying to keep me moving down the bank, I'm not going anywhere. And that's serious. It's funny, but that is exactly how in 2016, 2019, that's why I caught those the big stringers in Florida and won. That's why I caught the 35-pound bag one day and 37-pound bag one day at Falcon and was second. It's slowing down.
So when you say slowing down, I'm assuming you're switching away from your crankbaits, from your spinner baits, or is that not the case?
No, that's not really the case. I've been doing this now, and when I started making the change from catching a limit every day to trying to catch the right fish nowadays at the elite level, which are the 4-pound plus fish ever fish. When I started making that change, I realized I'm in the right areas. I know how to find the right areas. Why am I not catching the bigger fish? Okay. And so that's when I started having to reevaluate the way I was fishing these areas. It wasn't like I wasn't where the big fish were.
Yeah.
I was finding areas with the most nutrition, with the most food, with the best habitat, and that's where they live.
Yeah.
So what do I need to do? And that's when I had to start evaluating the speed. I knew, the speed I fished at, and that's what made me successful. So the hardest thing to give up is what you're good at. And but I knew there were some things wrong there now, because I wasn't catching the quality fish I'm going to need to weigh in if I'm going to continue to fish at this level in tournaments. And so slowing down was the first move, because like I said, I knew I was in the right area. And also, but probably outside of that, I jokingly talk about putting the power poles in the mud and being more thorough dissecting an area. What I had to change was, I have a practice speed and then I have a tournament day speed, and those better not be the same, because you don't want to be overfishing areas in practice, but at the same time, in the tournament, you don't want to be fishing through them. And what I ended up doing was I was using my practice speed in tournament days. Okay, and so I realized I'm blowing through these areas just like it was practice, and so I can't possibly be presenting it to every fish in here. So I slow down. So I did. I put the power poles in the mud, and I started just probably making 5 times as many casts in a given range of cast that I was making before. Okay, so I was actually giving the fish more of an opportunity. Was that changing baits? Yeah, maybe 10 or 20 of those casts. Maybe I'd make 3 or 4 of them with one bait, then pick up another bait and go right back through the area with another bait. So yes, it was giving me opportunity to present multiple baits. But then that really started. I noticed improving the quality of fish, the amount of quality fish I could get out of a given area. But then you had to recognize, even then, if you weren't there within these good areas, there was even keyer areas where you knew, hey, this is prime where the bigger fish probably are coming from. Whether you caught one there in practice or whatever, or just the way it looked to you. Or maybe you see them, and like you do in Florida, you see them cruising, the bigger fish. So I said, am I just going to sit on top of these all day? Or am I going to do like I've always done, run a milk run? And of course, I'm going to run a milk run. I'm not going to sit on top of anything all day. But I had to learn, and then I learned, after 30, 40 years of fishing, there's windows of time. Just go back in your own memory. There's windows of time when I catch the bigger fish. In my mind, what kind of days are those? What kind of conditions are those? And so I'm running, telling how many of those things through my brain. Okay, and if you want to simplify it without getting too complicated, they're the worst conditions you will have that day. Or it's usually, when you catch those bigger fish. Pre-front, the front's coming, the wind's coming up, rainy, stormy weathers. Now those don't occur every day. Not in the big macro sense, but in the macro sense, they do occur in the micro sense. In other words, when I get there early in the morning and there's a little breeze coming to meet the sun, which may last 20 minutes, that's when I need to be there. So I had to be there definitely anytime I saw those conditions presented themselves. Even if I was all the way across the other side of Okeechobee, when I saw that cloud bank coming into the lake, I'm going back to those key areas. Okay, so I've gotten good at, still not great at, is recognizing these windows and making sure you're where you think the big fish are during those small windows of time. And so that's kind of where, I've been able to produce these giant strings of fish that and like I said, I've had 4 30-pound plus strings of largemouth, plus 5 fish limits now in recent years. Plus I've had the 6 biggest strings of smallmouth in my whole life, the last 3 years. And it's doing the same thing with smallmouth that I'm doing with largemouth.
So it's not so much about making slower retrieves It's just making more presentations in an area, and so you're moving your baits the same speed, but your boat's slower through the area. Does that sound about right?
Exactly right. Gotcha. Because actually both of the St. John's tournaments, I was burning the bait. Gotcha. I was using a chatterbait type bait in 2016, and I was using the trickster spinnerbait in 2019, and it was what we call the waking. Both of them were waking. Yeah. I wasn't slow rolling, which you might think during those time frames. But it was during those key windows that worked, you know. And Falcon was a similar situation, you know. I was using a medium-sized square bill, but you know, there was a few things, and it always is, you know. I realized the fish were in the bushes, because that's all Falcon is bushes. Mm. But I realized they were not on the bottom. They were suspended halfway up in the bushes. And the first day I fished too big. The first day I had 12 pounds. Ended up with about 105 pounds for the 12-pound day at Falcon. But I was fishing a deeper dive in square bill, and I was going down too deep. Yeah. And I went to Takahiro Mori, I'm just going to admit it. We were standing in line, and he goes, I catching them with a little square bill. Really, he had about a 25-pound bag, which I only had a 12-pound bag. So, well, and then it hit me, maybe, because you know, the strikes I was getting on the bigger square bill that was going down 7-8 foot in these bushes was either on the way down or the way up. Mm. So it wasn't down at the peak at the bottom. So I said, So I went to medium size, and they're all sitting in the middle of bushes, and it was, you know.
And that even just shows the importance, regardless of everything, is just paying attention to your bait when you get your strikes, when it's coming up, when it's coming down. Because if you had been able to, obviously hindsight's 20/20, but if you could have recognized that in the moment, right, that would have worked out better. But again, there's no way of knowing that. I do key in on a lot of those little things in my retrieve, though. A lot of times on camera, it's very funny when I'm working deep diving crankbait. I like to just burn my crankbaits back as fast as I can. And then a lot of times I'll be making a cast and I'll be explaining what I'm doing, and I'll turn back to the camera to look at the camera and talk. I stop it for a second. Boom. You will see it in my videos all the time. And so now I've made a conscious effort to burn and stop, burn, stop. And we're talking about retrieves already on one of these videos, but you know, the retrieve, the area, the making more presentations, the feeding windows, there's so much that goes into it. And I think that a lot of people go to the lake and they just try to go out and try to find a spot that has a fish. Like, let me go fish trees. But there's so much more strategy, especially when you want to do really well and perform in tournaments, that you have to keep in mind. I think people just don't even realize.
Well, and that's why I accuse us as a human. You get asked this question, I'm sure, is a bass smart? And I go, you define smart. If you define smart as intellectual knowledge, no. If you define smart as fully using your awareness to their highest level, he's 10 times smarter than we are. Okay, because he has to be. Yeah. If he doesn't use every sense he has to the highest level, he doesn't live, he doesn't survive. Humans, we're zombies, most of us. Okay, even when I do talks at the college stuff, I go, do y'all believe in zombies? And they all go, and they said, I said, and then I go into awareness. I said, humans, we don't smell, we don't taste the food we eat, we don't understand wide angle vision versus focus vision. I said, feeling your baits and lures. I said, then that's what you're talking about here when your retrieve is coming up or going down or you're changing. A lot of people don't even put that into the equation of the bite when it happens because their awareness didn't allow them to. You know how I can remember the first bass I ever caught burning a spinnerbait. But it was the same thing you're talking about. I didn't intend to catch the fish that way. Yeah. I'm reeling a spinnerbait, slow rolling a spinnerbait, and I'm in the bass club. This is probably 1970, 1971. And a school blows up over here. I just happened to be looking back at the bait, and it was on the top, coming back to me fast. Because then I threw out to the school, and they didn't hit it, just slow rolling, and I threw it out there and burned it back and caught 2 or 3 more. So I was hooked on burning it. But that was just, again, a subtle little awareness that we call it, listen to the fish, whatever you want to call it. But it's really just awareness that, unfortunately, as humans, we don't have a saber-toothed tiger going to kill us when we walk out that door. So we don't use our awareness, you know. Fishermen, I think the good ones do a little bit. And awareness, you know, I teach wide angle vision and blind spots, you know, focus vision and how you should use it in fishing. And the one vision that we don't have very well good, or our awareness we're not very good at, you've gotten good at. And that's our underwater awareness, okay? Which we've been shut off from that. We've had to use strange tools to try to feel, okay, that coming over a log, or, you know, what's my crankbait doing? The early depth finders you can see a little bit, but still you can't nowadays. Now there's no excuse for not being totally aware of the environment that those fish are living in.
And in terms of awareness, when you're trying to go around the lake, what are some of the things you really key in on? Like, let's say you're just fishing down the bank and you have an average angler. Things I think about are like, I look for the birds, I look for shad on the surface. Are there any other things that like you've picked up over the years? You're like, oh, that's something, if that happens, I'm about to catch one.
Yeah, as a shallow water angler, I think your vision, you know, is obviously the dominant thing, even though unfortunately sometimes it's the only thing we use. You know as well as I do that your connection with plastic worms is feel, okay? And then, so you have that sense, but we don't even use our dominant vision correctly, and that is the sense that we get into either in fishing, and I'm kind of bad about this in fishing. You get into tunnel vision too much. You're looking right there under the dock. It's more what I call a flipper's vision. You flipping a flipper. Now he's real good at where his bait went down. He's real good at where did it hit it sinking, or did it hit it on the bottom, or did it hit it after the first hop. He sees the brim under the dock that he just flipped under. He sees the crawfish hose in the bank that he just flipped to. So his tunnel vision is extraordinary. So he's very aware of that little tunnel vision area that flipping is, but he doesn't see the blue heron chasing the brim down the bank over here that a bass is chasing the brim down the bank. So you try to, I tended to be more of a caster's vision, wide angle. I see that. I see the threadfin, the shad flipping back in the back of the cove. You know, like you said, I see the egrets and the blue herons and the grebes and the cormorants. You know, I see the coots over there diving on, and you know, there's supposed to be grass there, but I miss the micro world that the flipper sees, and to be really good, you need to see both of them. But then there's the vision of running down the lake. Our vision works in a way that it's like we're taking multiple pictures, okay, but we don't always comprehend or consciously aware of the pictures. So here, if I'm in simple terms, if I'm driving down the lake, most fishermen are going, good spot, bad spot, good spot, bad spot, good spot, bad spot. And we all tend to judge things by the same rationale. Oh, look at all them lily pads over there. Oh, that bank's flat, nothing on it at all. So we're all judging it and making the majority of us are making that decision, that conclusion, and they're the same. Yeah. So the good spots are going to get fished. Yeah. So the bad spots are what I call the blind spots. Yeah. Okay, they're not going to get much pressure. So then that's when I go look at it and I find the Pine Bluff Harbor little ledge that couldn't tell what's there unless you went and looked for it.
Here's what to look forward to on the next episode.
Joseph Campbell made this statement: we're not really searching for the purpose of life. We're searching how to be more intensely alive. And there ain't but one way to do that. And that's elevate your awareness, your sensory abilities to their highest level as much as you possibly can. It's something fishing will do for you indirectly.